Tund rushed into the hospital, blood on his shirt and fear in his eyes, whispering just one name, Amara. The automatic doors of Mercy Crown Hospital slid open with a tired hiss, rainwater dripping from the man's shoes onto the polished floor. Nurses looked up from their stations. A security guard stood frozen, hand hovering near his belt. The man staggered forward, breathing hard, his eyes wide and unfocused, like someone running from a ghost only he could see. His voice was a raw whisper, scraping past his dry lips. I don't know who I am," he said, clutching his head as if trying to hold his thoughts together. "But please, you have to help me find Amara." That name again. Moments later, his legs gave out, and he collapsed onto the sterile linoleum. When he woke up, bright fluorescent lights burned his eyes. Machines beeped softly in a steady, rhythmic pulse. The sharp, clean smell of antiseptic filled the air, a stark contrast to the damp earth and rain he vaguely recalled. A nurse with kind eyes smiled gently at him. "You gave us quite a scare. Can you tell me your name?" He opened his mouth, ready to answer, but nothing came out. The space where his name should have been was a hollow, empty void. His past was a dark, impenetrable wall. No memories. No faces of loved ones. No echo of a voice from yesterday. There was just one thing, a single word carved deep into his soul like a scar that refused to heal. Amara. He had no idea who she was. Was she his wife? His sister? A stranger he was supposed to meet? The name felt like an anchor in a raging sea, the only piece of himself he had left. But as he lay there, listening to the quiet hum of the hospital, a terrifying thought began to form. He didn't know if Amara was his salvation, or the very reason his life had fallen apart. He had to find her. He had to know the truth, no matter how devastating it might be. His journey didn't start with a first step, but with a single, haunting name. The doctors ran every test they could think of. They checked my fingerprints against every database on the planet. Nothing. They looked for missing person reports that matched my description. Zilch. It was like I had just materialized out of thin air. In the hospital records, I was a ghost. They called me Patient X. A man with no past, no identity, no family. A complete blank slate. But the weird thing is, I didn't feel blank. I didn't feel empty at all. At night, when the hospital was quiet and dark, my mind would come alive. I'd have these dreams, these flashes of a life that felt like mine but that I couldn't grasp. I'd see a woman, her head thrown back, laughing under the shade of a big mango tree. The sunlight would catch in her hair. Then the scene would shift. A dark room, lit only by flickering candles. The air thick with tension. The sound of raised voices, an argument so bitter I could taste it. I'd see a ring, maybe a wedding ring, hitting the floor and rolling away into the shadows. Then, the images would get faster, more chaotic. Blood. So much blood. Rain pouring down, washing everything clean, but making it all so cold. And a scream. A scream that would jolt me awake every single time, my heart pounding in my chest. And through all of it, one name, a whisper that felt both like a prayer and a curse. Amara. Who was she? Was she the woman under the mango tree? Was it her scream that haunted my sleep? A kind-faced social worker would visit me every day. She'd sit by my bed with her notepad, asking the same gentle questions. "Anything new today, Patient X?" Any flickers? One afternoon, her question hit a nerve. I felt a tremor start in my hands, a cold sweat on my brow. The images from my dreams swirled in my head, but this time, they brought a feeling with them. An overwhelming sense of guilt and betrayal. I looked at her, and the words just tumbled out. "I feel like I betrayed someone," I said, my voice barely a whisper. Or maybe they betrayed me. She wrote it down in her neat handwriting, but she couldn't capture the raw fear that was gripping me. She couldn't see the storm raging inside. Because that was the moment I knew. This wasn't just amnesia. This wasn't some random accident that wiped my memory clean. Deep down, in a place I couldn't quite reach yet, a terrible truth was clawing its way to the surface. Whatever happened before I woke up in this hospital, whatever led me here, it wasn't an accident. It was something I ran from, or something that was chasing me. The name Amara echoed in my mind. Was she the key? Was she the reason I couldn't remember? I had to find out. My life, whoever I was, depended on it. The past wasn't just gone, it was buried. And I had a terrifying feeling that digging it up might be the last thing I ever do. But I had to try. I had to know who I was, and what I had done. The hospital became my prison. Every white wall, every sterile smell, felt like it was closing in on me. The doctors were kind but clinical. They saw a medical puzzle, a fascinating case of retrograde amnesia. They didn't see the man trapped inside, drowning in feelings he couldn't name. My only escape was the dreams, but they were a double-edged sword. They offered clues, these fragmented pieces of a life, but they also brought the terror. The woman, Amara. Her laughter was so vivid I could almost feel the warmth of the sun on my skin. But her scream was the sound of something breaking, something irreparable. Was I the one who caused her pain? Was the blood on my hands? These questions tormented me. I started to look at my own reflection as if it belonged to a stranger. Who was this man staring back at me? What was he capable of? The feeling of betrayal I mentioned to the social worker grew stronger each day. It was a cold, hard knot in my stomach. Betrayal is a two-way street. Did I break someone's trust, or did they shatter mine? The ring falling to the ground, was that me, giving up? Or was it her, walking away? I started to pay more attention to the world outside my window. Every passing car, every face in the crowd below, could be a link to my past. Was someone looking for me? Or was someone hoping I'd stay lost forever? I knew I couldn't stay here, waiting for my memory to return. That felt too passive, too dangerous. The truth wasn't just going to float back to me. It was hiding for a reason, and I had to go find it. The next time the social worker came, I had a new resolve in my eyes. I need to get out of here, I told her. I need to find Amara. She looked concerned, but I think she also saw that the ghost in her records was starting to become a person again. A person with a mission. Finding Amara was the only way forward. It was the only way to know if I was the hero of my story or the villain. Across the city, far from the polished gleam of Mercy Crown Hospital, in a modest apartment filled with the ghosts of a life half-packed away, Amara Okafor dropped her phone. The plastic clattered against the hardwood floor, a sharp, sudden sound in the quiet room. But she barely heard it. Her entire world had narrowed to the voice coming from the small speaker, a radio presenter's calm, detached tone that felt like a punch to the gut. The words echoed, bouncing off the walls covered in half-empty picture hooks and the cardboard boxes that stood like sentinels of a future she was trying to build. Unidentified man found at Mercy Crown Hospital. Repeating the name Amara. Her heart didn't just stop. It felt like it was ripped from her chest. The room, with its familiar mess of bubble wrap and packing tape, began to spin. The afternoon sunlight streaming through the window warped and blurred, the dust motes dancing in the light becoming a dizzying swarm. No, 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 she whispered, the words barely a breath, stolen by the sudden, suffocating panic. It couldn't be. It was impossible. 3 years. It had been 3 long, agonizing years since that night. The night the world as she knew it shattered into a million irreparable pieces. The night she lost everything. She had taken that name, his name, and buried it deep within the darkest corners of her memory. She had covered it with layers of denial, sealed it shut with desperate prayers whispered into her pillow at night, and forced herself, day by day, to move on. She had built a new life, a fragile fortress around her wounded heart. She had a new job, new friends, a new routine. She was supposed to be safe. She was supposed to be free. But now it was back. The name, that one word, spoken by a stranger on the radio, yet sounding so terrifyingly familiar, had bulldozed through all her defenses. It was a ghost she thought she had exorcised, now returned to haunt her in the bright light of day. Her hands started to tremble, a violent, uncontrollable shaking that began in her fingertips and radiated up her arms. She looked down at them, strangers to her, as they fumbled for her car keys on the cluttered kitchen counter. The metallic jingle was the only real sound in a world that had dissolved into a roaring in her ears. She had to go. She didn't know why. She didn't know what she would find. But an invisible force was pulling her, dragging her back into the past she had fought so hard to escape. She snatched the keys, her knuckles white. It was a terrifying realization, a truth she had tried to run from for 1,000 days and 1,000 nights. Some names, some memories, some loves, they never truly die. They just lie in wait, biding their time in the shadows, waiting for the perfect moment to rise from the grave and claim you all over again. And for Amara, that moment was now. The waiting was over. Imagine this, a hospital room, sterile and quiet, bathed in the soft, gray light of a cloudy afternoon. This is where we find Amara, frozen at the doorway, her hand clutching the frame so tightly her knuckles are white. She's staring at a man sitting by the window, a man she knows better than her own heartbeat. He's looking out at the city, but his gaze is distant, searching for something he can't name. It's a posture Amara recognizes instantly, the slight slump of his shoulders, the stillness that speaks of a deep, inner storm. She remembers a time when that same silence meant he was thinking about their future, about the life they were building. Now it's a void. She takes a breath, the air catching in her throat, and the soft sound makes him turn. For a single, earth-shattering moment, their eyes lock. And in that connection, something ancient and powerful cracks open, a bond that time and tragedy couldn't completely sever. His voice is gentle, laced with a confusion that tears at her soul. "Do I know you?" he asks. The question is a physical blow, and the dam she's been building for weeks finally breaks. Tears stream down her face, hot and unstoppable. All she can manage is a choked whisper. "Yes, you do." He watches her, a flicker of something in his eyes, not recognition, but something deeper, a cellular memory stirring within him. He pushes himself up from the chair, his movements slow and uncertain. He can feel his own heart thudding against his ribs, a frantic rhythm he doesn't understand. A name surfaces from the fog in his mind, a whisper from a life he can't recall. "Are you Amara?" She can only nod, another wave of tears blurring her vision of him. The space between them hums with 1,000 unspoken words. Every argument they ever had, every laugh they ever shared, every promise they ever made. It all hangs in the air, a ghost of a life lived. The love, the pain, the regret, it's all there, thick and tangible. Amara can feel every ounce of it, a weight pressing down on her chest. But he feels nothing. He sees a beautiful woman crying for a stranger, and the tragedy of it is a chasm that separates them more completely than any distance ever could. He doesn't remember their first date, the way she'd laughed and spilled coffee all over his shirt. He doesn't remember the night he proposed under a sky full of stars, swearing that he'd love her for all of eternity. He doesn't remember the accident, the screech of tires, the shattering glass, the darkness that followed. He woke up in this room with a blank slate, his own history erased. The doctors called it amnesia. He calls it a prison. People come and go, telling him stories about a man he doesn't know, showing him pictures of a life he doesn't recognize. But this woman, Amara, her presence feels different. It feels like coming home to a house you've never seen before. Amara takes a tentative step into the room, then another. She stops just a few feet away from him, her hands trembling. She wants to scream, to shake him, to force him to remember the love that had been the very center of her universe. But looking into his lost, questioning eyes, she knows she can't. That man, her man, is gone, at least for now. In his place is this fragile stranger who looks just like him. "My name is Liam," he says, offering his name as if it's a new gift. Amara almost breaks down again. Hearing him introduce himself to her is a new kind of agony. But she takes a deep, steadying breath. She has to be strong. For him. For them. For the faint glimmer of hope that one day, he'll find his way back to her. "It's good to meet you, Liam," she says, her voice surprisingly steady. It's the biggest lie she's ever told, and also the truest. Because right now, what he needs more than a wife he ain't remember is a friend who ain't give up. So, this is where their new story begins. It's a journey into the unknown, a test of whether love is something we remember or something we choose, again and again, even when we have every reason to walk away. Have you ever felt a phantom ache? A sense of loss for something you can't even name? Imagine waking up one day, and the person you were is just gone. That's Daniel's reality. And then there's Amara, the woman who holds the shattered pieces of his forgotten life. She tells him his name is Daniel Adewale, that they were once deeply in love, engaged, and on the verge of forever. She paints a picture of a life they built together, a future they dreamed of, filled with laughter and shared secrets. But she only shares the beautiful beginnings, the sun-drenched memories. She can't bring herself to speak of the ending, the part that tore their world apart. The pain is still too raw, too heavy to put into words. Daniel listens, and each word from Amara is like a ghost whispering in his ear. He feels a profound sadness, a crushing grief for a life he can't recall living, for a love he can't remember feeling. It's a bizarre and heartbreaking experience, mourning a version of himself that's a complete stranger. He looks at Amara, this woman who seems to know him better than he knows himself, and his voice is barely a whisper, filled with a confusion that cuts deep. Why? He asks, his eyes searching hers for an answer, for some kind of anchor in this sea of nothingness. Why do I feel like I've lost everything, even though I can't remember losing it? The question hangs in the air between them, heavy and unanswered. Amara has to look away. The real story, the one she's hiding behind her careful words and sad eyes, is not just about a lost past. It's about a devastating event, a secret that explains not only his amnesia but also the deep, unspoken sorrow that surrounds them both. The love he forgot is only half the story. The other half is the truth she's terrified to reveal, a truth that could either bring him back completely or shatter him beyond repair. What really happened to Daniel? Why did their dream of a future crumble into dust? The answers are locked away in Amara's heart, and the weight of that silence is crushing them both. This is more than just a story about memory loss. Are we the sum of our memories? Or is there something deeper, something that remains even when our past is wiped clean? Daniel's journey is a quest to find himself, to understand the echoes of a life he once cherished. He feels the love, the joy, and the pain in his soul, even if his mind can't connect the dots. It proves that some connections, some feelings, are etched so deeply into who we are that they can withstand even the complete erasure of memory. The love is still there, dormant but not dead, waiting for a spark to bring it back to life. But what happens when the truth finally comes out? Will it be the key that unlocks his past? Or will it be the final blow that convinces him some things are better left forgotten? Amara stands at a crossroads, torn between protecting him from the pain and giving him the chance to be whole again. It's a choice with no easy answer. This is a story about the enduring power of love, the weight of secrets, and the difficult path to rediscovering who you truly are, even when everything you thought you knew has vanished. The past doesn't just return, it seeps back, drop by agonizing drop. For Daniel, it began with a shadow, a whisper of a memory that tasted like ash. Slowly, like old photographs developing in a dark room, the images sharpened. A business deal, the familiar weight of a pen in his hand, the crisp scent of new money. But something was wrong. There was a face in the memory, a face he trusted. His cousin, a smile that didn't quite reach the eyes. He remembered the papers spread across a mahogany desk. The realization hit him like a physical blow. Even now, years later, money vanished, not just numbers on a screen, but the foundation of his future, the fruit of his labor, stolen. It wasn't just a business deal gone wrong. It was a setup, a carefully laid trap sprung by his own blood. The anger was fresh, raw. He was at Amara's family home, wasn't he? The air was thick with tension, unspoken accusations hanging between them like chandeliers of ice. He remembered shouting, the sting of betrayal in his voice echoing off their cold, indifferent faces. They accused him. And then, the night. The night that had wiped his memory clean. The night of the crash. Flashing lights, the screech of tires on wet asphalt, the splintering sound of metal and glass. It wasn't just a random accident. It was all connected. The stolen money, the false accusations, the cousin's duplicity, Amara's family closing ranks. The crash was the final, brutal punctuation mark on their betrayal. This wasn't just a lover's quarrel or a simple misunderstanding. This was deeper, darker. It was a betrayal rooted in family, in shared history, in blood. And blood has a long memory. Blood never forgets a debt. As the fog in Daniel's mind finally lifted, he understood. The ring on his finger wasn't just a symbol of lost love. It was a shackle, a constant reminder of the war that had been waged against him. And he knew, with chilling certainty, that this war was far from over. The past was back, and it was demanding justice. What would you do if you discovered your whole life was built on a lie, orchestrated by the people you trusted most? It's a terrifying thought, isn't it? Daniel is just starting to unravel the web, and every thread he pulls reveals another venomous secret. The truth was supposed to set Tund free, but it just trapped me in a darker reality. The whispers I'd been hearing, the fragmented images that haunted my sleep, they weren't just nightmares. She was the one who finally handed me the shovel. Standing there, her face a mask of guilt and sorrow, she confessed everything. Her father, the man I once respected, The man I hoped to one day call my own father-in-law had known all along. He knew about the danger. It wasn't just a simple case of being in the wrong place at the wrong time. It was a calculated sacrifice. It was all just a pawn in his twisted game to protect the pristine family name. The deal he struck in the shadows, the enforced silence that followed, it was all designed to erase me. The family I had dreamed of joining, the people I thought would welcome me with open arms, were the very architects of my downfall. The betrayal cut deeper than any physical wound. It wasn't the work of faceless enemies or distant strangers. It was the intimate, personal treachery of those I had trusted with my heart. They smiled at me. They shared meals with me, all while knowing they were leading me to the slaughter. Amara's words were the key that unlocked the floodgates. Suddenly, the past wasn't a murky, confusing fog anymore. It was a tidal wave of crystal-clear moments, crashing down on me with relentless force. I saw it all. Every detail, every sensation came rushing back. The smell of the damp air, the cold steel against my skin, the look of utter indifference in their eyes. The pain was immense, a physical ache that started in my chest and spread through every inch of my body. It was the pain of a broken heart, a shattered trust, and a stolen life. But as the waves of memory and pain washed over me, something else began to stir in the depths. It started as a low hum, a simmering heat deep within my soul. It wasn't just sadness or grief. It was rage, a pure, unadulterated fury that burned away the tears and solidified into something hard and sharp. The man they tried to bury was gone. The naive, trusting Daniel was a ghost. In his place stood someone new, someone forged in the fires of betrayal. They thought they had protected their precious family name, but all they did was create their worst nightmare. They wanted me to be a forgotten secret, but I am a memory that has returned. And this memory is screaming for vengeance. The game isn't over. They may have written the first chapter, but I will write the last. They wanted silence. I'll give them a storm. The path ahead is going to be intense, and you won't want to miss a single moment. Daniel left the hospital, but he wasn't running away this time. No, he was running toward something, toward a confrontation. He knew, deep in his gut, that even without his memories, destiny hadn't brought him back to this place by accident. There was a reason, a purpose he couldn't yet grasp, but could feel thrumming beneath the surface of his fractured mind. Every familiar street corner, every fleeting face in the crowd, felt like a breadcrumb on a trail he was forced to follow. He had to face whatever was waiting for him at the end of it. Meanwhile, Amara was wrestling with her own demons. A chilling premonition had settled over her, a dark cloud that wouldn't lift. She knew something terrible was on the horizon, a storm brewing that was connected to Daniel's return. It was more than just a feeling. It was a certainty that gnawed at her, a whisper of a past that refused to stay buried. She could feel the echoes of that long-ago tragedy, the one that had shattered their lives, growing louder with each passing hour. The past wasn't just a memory. It was a living, breathing entity, and it was coming back for them. Some stories, you see, don't just end when we decide to walk away. They don't simply fade into the background of our lives. They wait. They lie dormant, patient, biding their time in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to reemerge. They wait for justice. And for Daniel and Amara, the time for waiting was over. Justice was knocking at the door, demanding to be let in. The pieces of the puzzle were scattered, hidden in the fragments of Daniel's mind and the fears of Amara's heart. But they were starting to come together, forming a picture that was both terrifying and inevitable. He had to remember, not just for himself, but for her, for the truth that had been silenced for so long. As he walked the familiar yet foreign streets, flashes of a life he couldn't recall flickered at the edge of his vision. A child's laugh, the scent of rain on pavement, the warmth of a hand in his. Were they real? Or just ghosts of a life that never was? He didn't know, but he knew he had to find out. His journey wasn't just about reclaiming his past. It was about uncovering a truth that had the power to either save them or destroy them completely. And Amara, watching from a distance, knew she couldn't protect him forever. The walls she had built around her heart, around the secret she'd guarded for years, were beginning to crumble. The approaching danger wasn't just for Daniel. It was for both of them. This wasn't just his story anymore. It was theirs. A shared destiny, a shared tragedy, and a shared, desperate need for closure. The story was waiting, and it demanded an ending. One way or another, justice would be served. Standing before the house that once rejected him, Daniel felt a storm raging inside. It wasn't just rain and wind. It was a tempest of memories, a whirlwind of pain and longing. This was the place where his childhood dreams had shattered, where the doors had been slammed shut in his face, leaving him out in the cold, both literally and figuratively. For years, the fire of revenge had been his only warmth, a constant companion whispering promises of retribution. He'd imagined this moment 1,000 times. The look of shock on their faces, the crumbling of their pride, the sweet, bitter taste of victory. He'd built an empire from the ashes of their disdain, all for this single, climactic confrontation. Revenge whispered in his ear now, a seductive hiss. It told him to burn it all down, to make them feel the same helplessness he had felt. It promised a catharsis, a final balancing of the scales. The plan was perfect, every detail meticulously arranged. All he had to do was give the signal. But then, another voice, softer and far more powerful, pleaded from the depths of his heart. It was the voice of love. It was Amara. She stood beside him, her hand gripping his, a desperate anchor in his turbulent sea of emotions. Her eyes, those beautiful, soulful eyes that had seen past his hardened exterior and loved the broken boy within, were filled with tears. She saw the war playing out across his face, the darkness threatening to consume him entirely. "Please, Daniel," she cried, her voice cracking, each word a desperate plea. "Look at me. Look at what we have. Don't let the past destroy what's left of us." Her words were not an accusation, but a prayer. She wasn't just asking him to stop for her sake, but for his own. She knew the poison of vengeance. She knew that even if he won this battle, he would lose the war for his own soul. The victory would be hollow, leaving him more empty than before. The ghosts of the past would not be exorcised by creating new ones. He looked from the imposing, cold facade of the house to Amara's face, illuminated by the faint glow of a street lamp. He saw their life together flashing before his eyes. Their first meeting, the tentative smiles, the shared laughter that had healed wounds he never thought would close. He saw the future they had planned, a future filled with light, warmth, and the kind of peace he had craved his entire life. Was he really willing to sacrifice all of that for a moment of fleeting, destructive satisfaction? Was making them suffer more important than ensuring his own happiness? Amara's grip tightened. "This isn't you, Daniel," she whispered. "The man I love is stronger than this. He builds things, he doesn't destroy them. He healed himself. He doesn't need to hurt them to prove he's whole." She was right. The boy who had been rejected was no longer standing there. In his place was a man who had found love, who had built a life, who had found his own worth without their approval. He realized that true power wasn't in crushing his enemies. It was in the ability to walk away, to choose a different path. It was in protecting the love he had found, not sacrificing it on the altar of old grievances. The past had shaped him, yes, but it did not have to define his future. The choice was never truly between love and revenge. It was between living and merely existing, between a future bright with promise and a present forever chained to a painful past. Daniel closed his eyes, taking a deep, shuddering breath. He let the cool night air wash over him, clearing the last vestiges of the storm. When he opened them again, the fire of vengeance was gone, replaced by a clear, calm resolve. He turned to Amara, his expression softening as he looked into her hopeful, tear-streaked face. He had made his choice. And in that moment, standing before the house that symbolized all his pain, he finally, truly, let it go. The hum of the city seemed to quiet down as Daniel turned his back on the warehouse. He wasn't running, not this time. Lighter. It wasn't the stride of a man who had forgotten, but of one who had finally decided to let go. Forgiveness, he was learning, wasn't about erasing the past. It couldn't be. The scars, the memories, they were part of him now. But holding on to the anger, the thirst for revenge, that was like drinking poison and expecting the other person to suffer. He was done with that poison. He was choosing peace. Amara's hand found his, her fingers lacing through his. Her touch was an anchor in the swirling chaos of his mind. As they walked, a single drop of rain hit his cheek. Then another. Soon, a gentle curtain of water began to fall, washing the grime from the streets, mirroring the night that had shattered his world. The night he lost everything. The scent of wet asphalt, the distant sirens, the slick reflection of streetlights on the pavement. It all came rushing back. But this time, the memory didn't break him. It didn't drag him down into that dark abyss of helplessness. Instead, as he looked at Amara, her face illuminated by the soft glow of a nearby cafe, he remembered who he was. Not just the broken man who had woken up with no name, but Daniel. The man who had loved, who had been loved. And more importantly, he saw with piercing clarity the man he wanted to be. Someone who protected, who cherished, who built a future instead of being chained to the wreckage of the past. He realized something profound in that rainy moment. Sometimes, the memory we fight so hard to reclaim isn't the one we truly need. The memory we lose isn't just our past. It's the pain that was never meant to follow us into the future. The pain is a ghost, and he was finally letting it rest. Amara squeezed his hand, a silent question in her eyes. "Are you okay?" He smiled, a genuine, unburdened smile that reached his eyes for the first time in what felt like an eternity. "I am," he said, his voice steady. "Let's go home." The words felt foreign and yet perfectly right. Home wasn't a place he remembered, but a feeling he was discovering with her. They reached her car, the rain drumming a soft rhythm on the roof. Inside, the world outside seemed to fade away, leaving just the two of them in a small, safe bubble. He watched the raindrops race each other down the windshield, each one a tiny, distorted reflection of the city lights. He thought of Leo, alone in that warehouse. He didn't feel hatred or even pity, just a quiet finality. Their paths had crossed in violence and confusion, and now they were separate once more. He had his path, and Leo had his. Daniel turned to Amara, truly seeing her. The way her brow furrowed slightly in concentration as she drove, the strength in her hands on the steering wheel, the unwavering belief in her eyes when she looked at him. She had been his compass when he was completely lost, his memory when he had none. She hadn't just saved his life, she had given him a reason to live it. He reached out and gently brushed a stray strand of hair from her face. "Thank you," he whispered, "for everything." She glanced at him, a warm smile spreading across her face. "You would have done the same for me." And he knew, without a doubt, that she was right. The car moved smoothly through the rain-slicked streets, leaving the industrial decay of the docks behind and heading towards the heart of the city. The lights blurred into long streaks of red and gold. It felt like they were driving out of a nightmare and into a dream, a future. His past was still a fractured mosaic, pieces missing, edges sharp. But he no longer felt the desperate need to force them all together. Maybe some pieces were better left lost. Maybe the picture he was meant to create was a new one, with new colors, new shapes, and Amara right there at the center of it. He leaned his head back against the seat and closed his eyes, not in exhaustion, but in contentment. For the first time, the silence in his mind wasn't a terrifying void, but a peaceful quiet. He was no longer just a man defined by a single, traumatic night. He was Daniel, and he was going home. But as they turned a corner, leaving the main thoroughfare for a quieter side street, another vehicle made the same turn, its headlights momentarily flaring in their rearview mirror before dimming. A sleek, black car. It kept a careful, consistent distance, a shadow clinging to them through the rain. It navigated the traffic with an effortless, predatory grace, its presence unnoticed by the two people in the car ahead, who were lost in their newfound peace. Inside that trailing car, a figure sat in the passenger seat, shrouded in darkness. The city lights flickered across their face, illuminating a faint, knowing smile. A smile that held secrets and intentions far from the peace Daniel had just found. A smile that promised this story was far from over. Life may erase our memories, but it never erases our purpose. And love, true love, will always find its way back, even through broken minds and shattered pasts. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe for the next chapter.